thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Locations Unknown. Wherever you are, thank you for tuning in. I'm your co-host Mike, and with us as always is Joe.
What's up, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. We just have a couple of updates. As always, we do have the merchandise available on our Facebook store, so please go on there and get some hats. We recently got a great photo from the Berg family. Their entire family was wearing the hats on their hike down in Arizona, so that was pretty cool. If you do have hats already, send us your pictures and we'll post them online. And as always, the show is brought to you by Verger CBD products. And I recently, Mike, I just got their CBD balm, and that stuff is amazing.
What do you use
legitimate, it for? I have sore joints.
Yeah.
If I have a tight muscle from working out or something, if it was bad enough, I used to take ibuprofen or a medication.
Yeah.
I'll rub this stuff on there, and in 10 minutes to 20 minutes, the pain is gone.
Wow.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's a lot of times I just don't believe it's working. I give it to my wife all the time because she's super skeptical. She loves it, so go on there. Besides skincare products, they do have, honey. They have the tinctures, pretty much all of your typical CBD products, so check them out. They support the show. It is vergermed.com. That's VERDUREMED.com. All right, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown.
May 25th, 1999. Carl Anders was on his second summit attempt of Mt Shasta in the California wilderness. An avid outdoorsman and runner, Carl was no stranger to the perils and difficulties of a technical mountain climb. While ascending Mt Shasta with his two close friends, Carl decided to head up the trail while his friends packed up camp. When they arrived at the next stop, Carl was gone. He had vanished into thin air. What happened to Carl? Where did he go? Are there any logical explanations? Join us this week as we try to uncover the truth behind the mysterious disappearance of Carl Anders.
Mount Shasta and the area surrounding it are part of the Shasta Trinity National Forest. The Shasta Trinity National Forest is located in California and is actually potentially an active volcano at the southern end of the Cascade Range in Siskiyou County. Now, this is located in the northern part of California near the Oregon border. The oldest known human settlement in the area dates back to about 7,000 years ago. European Americans first visited the area in the 1820s and encountered 9 different Native American tribes. The California gold rush of the early 1850s brought the first European American settlers. So this is, just like California was showing up on maps later in the founding, as far as, Native Americans were always settled there, but as far as your more modern time groups coming in, early 1800s with real activity around the gold rush, like much of California in the 1850s.
Yeah, that's really the only reason why a lot of these people went out there was the hope to find gold. And
crazy risk takers, which,
yeah,
if you think that's why California is the way it is,
yeah,
I'll leave it there.
And it was a dangerous time for people to be in California in the 1850s. Obviously, like you said, there was a lot of Indian tribes out there, wildlife, treacherous terrain. So not an easy life, and a lot of people died.
Absolutely. So in this area, the closest city is Mount Shasta City. It's got a population of 3,302, and that was taken in 2017. So this is a low populous area, so really I would say it's got to be more touristy, the reason the attraction, because it's the only major mountain in that area.
Yeah, I kind of picture like a city like Breckenridge.
Okay.
When I think of Mount Shasta. I know Breckenridge is much higher elevation, but kind of that's what I'm picturing.
It exists more as a tourist location than as like a gateway or a major town for economy purposes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, people that climb the mountain will stay in Mount Shasta City the night before they head out.
Sure.
Hikers would do the same. I'm sure if we ever did Mount Shasta, we would probably stay in the city as well.
Oh, yeah. I want to, but as I'll get to soon, when we talk about this, it's very technical, so we're going to have to brush up on our ice climbing before we go out to Mount Shasta. There's not a lot of ice climbing available at southeastern Wisconsin, but...
No.
So we'll go over a couple of interesting historical facts about the mountain and the area. The first ascent of Mount Shasta occurred in 1854 by Elias Pierce after several failed attempts. And in 1856, so just 2 years later, the first woman and their party reached the summit. So this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't know, Mike, and it actually came out a lot with the recent news about the Everest stuff.
Yeah.
It's not technically a mountain summit unless you get back down.
Really?
Yes, and I did not know that until I did Long's Peak initially, and they talked about the first woman that would have been attributed with summiting died on the way down, so they technically couldn't give her the summit, so it went to another woman.
Wow.
But yeah, if you make it up the mountain and get to the top and don't make it down, you technically did not summit that mountain.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, you get to the top, make it halfway back down, and then you fall or something.
Or even if it's not even death. If you have to be airlifted off or anything like that for medical emergency, it does not count. And there's some people in the mountain climbing community who will, fight tooth and nail to say you did not summit that mountain because you did not make it back under your own power.
Yeah, interesting.
So
I can't go up Everest and have a Sherpa carry me down. I didn't technically summit.
I don't know if they talk. Yeah, I wonder if it's if there's like a loophole there because it's not powered. Like if he like wears he like a backpack and then I think everyone there would just make fun of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that will work. So there's some interesting stuff about this mountain in particular. I think a lot of it is because it's got volcanic activity, but there's a ton of legends and lore, and it will follow up nicely to our last episode. So there's some lore from the Klamath tribes in the area held that Mount Shasta is inhabited by the spirit of the above world, Skell, who descended from heaven to the mountain summit at the request of the Klamath chief. Now, Skell fought with the spirit of the below world, which is Lau, who resided at Mount Mazama by throwing hot rocks and lava. And they're saying that's represented. That's probably represented by the eruption. So think about way before science and the knowledge base. You're at the base of this mountain, and maybe it hasn't done anything for a while, so your entire life it's dormant. Now all of a sudden it starts spitting out liquid hot rock. They're going to attribute to some crazy whatever. So you have the chief of that tribe calling down a spirit to fight the demon who's shooting lava and rocks out of your mountain.
I can't even imagine. It would, you have no basis of science, and you just see the earth just spewing stuff out.
It's terrifying when you know it's terrifying when you know what's happening. But it makes me think of a really funny thing I saw on the internet, just a comment of like, can you imagine what was going through the mind of the first human to see a sunset? like if you think about it, like this giant ball of light just slowly disappearing. That must have been terrifying. So that's obviously more of a joke, but anyway. So we'll get back to reality here. So the Shasta, the Wintu, the Akumawai, Etsugawai, and the Modoc tribes all have territory around this mountain. So those are all Native American tribes. And they conduct many sacred ceremonies. I think even still to this day, they do rituals and things like that for the mountain. Mm-hmm. So the Native Americans believe that the mountain was the sacred center of the universe and being home of the creator. So they thought this was like the place in the entire universe for the creator. The Wintu tribe even trace their people's origin back to a sacred spring right in that area. So this holds a lot of sacred meaning and ritual to the Native American tribes. Mm-hmm. Now, here's a neat story that really plays in well to our Alaska Triangle show. So there's the story of the Lemurians. Now, this is a race of higher dimensional beings from the crystal city that is inside the mountain, and the city's name is called Telos. So legend says that the Lemurians originally lived in the ancient continent of Lemuria that was in the North Pacific Ocean many, many thousands of years ago and went to war with Atlantis. So the Lemurians, I'm assuming, were losing this war, so they fled and they hid inside Mount Shasta. And in the 1940s, now we're getting real recent, there were apparent reports of people who were 7 feet tall, dressed in long white robes and sandals, going to the general store to buy supplies and paid for their purchases with chunks of gold.
Wow.
So the shopkeeper would take the gold, turn around to try and give them change, and the Lemurians would disappear. So you have this race of people who can just apparate, but they need to go to the local the general store to get supplies. So, and then lastly, some locals believe that the saucer-shaped lenticular clouds that often gather at the summit, and I've actually seen this when I was in Africa, when you have these peaks that don't have a mountain range around them, they get these perfectly disc-shaped lenticular clouds right at the summit.
Yeah.
Well, they think those are engineered by the Lemurians to camouflage alien cargo ships which are docking at the city of Telos.
Wow.
Again, they have these ships docking of cargo, but they got to go to the general store every now and then because, sometimes you just need floss or something.
Yeah, you got to get a pack of smokes or something.
Yeah, maybe, Amazon Prime might be a bit quicker than the alien cargo ships. So.
Well, yeah, that fits right in with our episode. Our last episode.
Yeah, most recently, this is the last one for in August 1987, believers in the spiritual significance of harmonic convergence, fit that all and, say that all 10 times fast. They describe Mount Shasta as one of the small number of global power centers. So Mount Shasta still to this day remains a focus of New Age attention. So as early as the late 80s, there's people who still think that has significant power as a landmark and part of the globe.
So to summarize all that, there's basically what you're saying, a lot of supernatural things going on in Mount Shasta.
Absolutely. And you have you mix in like some of the stories with, you don't know how credible they are, but you have a long history of this having an effect. And I won't get into the other show. You guys have to listen to it if you didn't. But there are those areas, and we talked about that are scientifically proven, that have different gravitational fields, that have different magnetic effects on the body. So I truly believe there can be things that happen in certain points in the world, and they really believe that this is one of those spots. I don't know if they've done any testing there to confirm that, but there's enough people talking about it and enough kind of weird, unexplainable events that occur that lead you to believe that there's something going on at Mount Shasta. So pretty cool. Some really neat history that dates back thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. So now I'll jump into the climate and things that are more relevant or could be relevant to this case. So climate of Mount Shasta experiences typical mountain weather, which means it can be warm and pleasant at the base. And then when you get up to the summit, it's snowy, below freezing, so completely different climate entirely. It can be subject to random storms that come up out of nowhere, so you have your issues there. One example is the city of Mount Shasta is at 3,500 feet, can be 83 degrees and sunny. Well, the summit's 28 degrees and got wintry weather.
Yeah, and that temperature reading was actually from today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it
was
was
83 and sunny and 28 at the summit.
Yep. Just imagine, I think, what's the temperature goes down by how many degrees every 1,000 feet? It's like, I should know this, but so you can imagine that, it's 83 degrees on, 3,500, 28 at the summit. In the winter, it's going to be below zero.
Oh, yeah. You're going to have very high winds and treacherousness in the winter. And this is an aggressive mountain, too, because a lot of times, like when you're doing 14ers in Colorado, you're starting at 9,000, sometimes even 10,000 feet. The city's at 3,500. So this is definitely more aggressive 14er compared to ones that I've ever done.
Yeah, and a lot of what I read about the mountain too is, and we talked about this, is because the mountain is kind of isolated, there's no other peaks around it, it's kind of a magnet for weather.
Oh, okay. So they're getting a lot of lightning storms.
Yeah, you get a lot of crazy weather in the summer, frequent lightning. You can get hurricane force winds above 8,000 feet.
Yeah, I was saying they're over 100 miles an hour sometimes at the tree line.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't care how good your tent is. I mean, if you got a 4-season tent like welded the ground, sure, but 100 mile an hour winds, it's gonna shred the fabric.
Yeah, they said after 74 miles per hour, you're not gonna be able to stand. It's gonna destroy any well anchored tent. So your only chance is maybe if you dig a pit and you have your tent down in the pit, you might be able to weather it out. But
sure, or like behind boulders or something to act as a really big windbreak.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so just wild weather, and that adds to the difficulty when people try to climb it.
I was gonna say, for experienced climbers, I can see the attraction because it's not a tall mountain, but it's a very difficult one. That's what it seems like. Is like you can on good weather days, I'm sure it's not very difficult for experienced guys, but
yeah.
I mean, you do this with me. I mean, we kind of like going through. It's not a nice fuzzy sunny day. A little bit of difficulty adds to the whole story. It adds to the pageantry of everything. Doing a mountain summit in a blizzard that's also lightning is pretty cool. It really is. Like, it's very dangerous to be on the summit, but if you're below summit and you're safe and it's high winds, blizzarding, there's snow lightning going on. It's a really neat experience if you enjoy that type of thing. My wife's a warm weather person. She would hate it, but I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you can experience a lot of that on this mountain. So.
Oh yeah, that's what it's saying. Well, it's saying the best times to climb are May to mid-July on the south and west sides. So basically, it's saying go in summer. Otherwise, it is possible in winter, but it's incredibly dangerous because it just gets super extreme. You have avalanches, falling ice. Pretty much all the routes get obscured. So I mean, you have to be highly trained to be doing that. And they're saying, carry avalanche beacons, shovels. You're on like Everest-style crampons, snow axes. You have to know what you're doing or you will just die. Yeah,
it's not somewhere that beginners should, start off climbing. It's definitely a mountain that you go to after you're kind of a seasoned climber.
Sure.
And, do not underestimate the environment on this mountain. That's, the impression I got from everything I read.
Well, and that it's just really harkens the point that no two 14ers are alike, because there's some you can just, sandals and shorts. No, I would never wear that. But, I mean, there's some that you can do in a couple hours because of where the starting point is. And this is an example of one that's just ridiculous. It'd be very difficult to do. No beginner could do it probably at all unless you had really good guides that were willing to risk their lives with you. But yeah, treacherous mountain. And I think, I don't want to oversay it too much, but I think it plays into the type of people who even attempt it, to set aside like that Carl, and you'll get into this, but Carl wasn't just like a dude on vacation who's like, hey, that's a cool mountain, let's go give it a shot.
Yeah.
So types of danger outside of everything we just went over. No real big animal danger. Black bears are the biggest thing you're going to run into. Scare them off.
Coyotes.
Coyotes. Nothing that's going to really pose a threat to a group of people that are doing a mountain climb. Terrain. It's 4 major overlapping volcanic cores. So the last time it erupted was 1786, and they have 7 named glaciers to get up there at a very complicated summit. So it seems like the last leg of your journey is pretty much a giant technical climb.
Yeah, and it's on snow and ice, so it's it not only is it you're climbing, but you're adding in that factor of snow and ice, so it makes it more difficult, and it's steep, and depending on what time of the year you're going, you might be dealing with falling ice.
Oh, sure.
Potential for avalanches.
Yeah, even just climbing it, you can get breakaway when you're climbing up the ice face. Yep. So if you have a group of people, that's where that experience comes in. You can't go like underneath each other. You kind of got to go sideways up the mountain so you don't kill the guys below you. And there's a lot of stuff going on there. It takes a lot of brain power as well as willpower.
This would be a mountain that I would definitely take along a kind of one of those emergency beacons.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. Last couple things, risk of exposure, very high because of the low temperatures, wind, lightning. So all your basic mountain risks plus extra being so technical and exposed. Again, like you said, Mike, it's not in a range of mountains that can kind of break things up. This is getting beat from all sides.
Mm-hmm.
So lack of shelter, again, once you get up the tree line, unless you're digging out, you're pretty much exposed. So I'd say, all in all, if we haven't said enough already, difficulty, very high, very difficult.
Yeah, this is not a hike that amateurs go on. It's for experienced climbers. So as we get into the character profile, you'll see that the people that we discuss are, relatively experienced. So you don't get the impression that they shouldn't be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, Mike, let's learn about Carl Landers.
Yeah, so Carl Herbert Landers, male, age 69. If he's alive now, he'd be about 89 years old. He was 5'9", weighed 150 pounds. So you can tell this guy's in pretty good shape. He had gray hair. The clothing that he was last seen in would be winter climbing gear. So from everything we read, these men were well prepared to summit Mount Shasta.
So he had all the right equipment. He's an older guy, which some might say, risk weather for his abilities, but I would say experienced. If he's that old and doing it, he's in great shape and has done it before.
Yeah, so he one of his hobbies, obviously he runs a lot, so he was part of a running club, which is where he actually met the two other guys that he hiked or attempted the summit with. But he also has a hobby of summiting the other peaks in California. So he's done other 14-footers. So, this isn't his first rodeo, so he kind of knows what he's getting into. A lot of his personality trait, and this is from his friends, they would say he's not a great athlete, but he enjoys the challenge of sports. So
it's kind of a weird comment.
Backhanded compliment.
These guys he's with, is he normally doing these mountains with these people?
It didn't say if he's summited other mountains with these two gentlemen, but
I would take it if you're going to do a technical climb with somebody.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you have climbed with them before.
I'm assuming so. It mentioned that, so the two guys that went climbing with him were Milt Gaines and Barry Gilmore.
Okay.
I don't know the age of Milt Gaines, but Barry was 70 years old, and they both were referred to as long-term friends of Carl's. So
okay, those are probably his climbing buddies.
And Barry Gilmore is from what I gathered, a very fit man. He was from 1961 to 1966 naval air pilot, so he flew off carriers Midway, Hancock, and Enterprise. And then for 33 years after he left the military, he was an airline pilot for American Airlines. So, and he was a part of this running club along with Carl and Milt. So, all these guys are in excellent shape.
They make it a habit of being in shape as a hobby.
Yeah, and one of the funny comments Barry mentioned about Carl was, this kind of goes back into the thing about being an athlete. He stated Carl wasn't an outstanding athlete, but he was a good runner. He wasn't a great scuba diver, he said he had gone scuba diving with Carl, and he wasn't the best swimmer, and he had gone skiing with him, but he wasn't the best skier. So he takes all these risks and does all of these cool things, but he's not really, he's not the best at it. So maybe that's a hint into possibly what happened to Carl. Maybe he made mistakes.
It sounds kind of like me.
That's all of us.
I just dabble in everything.
To get back into Carl, his main occupation was an engineer by trade. It didn't say what type of engineering, but for about a decade before he went missing, he actually worked as a salesperson for Trane Heating and Air Conditioning. So I'm imagining he probably worked till he was in his late 50s and then retired. But, a lot of people when they retire, they kind of get antsy.
Oh, yeah.
And they got to be doing something.
Sure.
So he probably, was doing the salesperson job just kind of to keep busy.
Yeah, I could see that. A job that keeps him on his feet is not very difficult.
And one of the things he loved doing was running. So for 30 years, he would run every morning. One year, his dream actually came true when he was allowed to run in the 100th anniversary of the Boston Marathon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they said he ran a respectable time of 5.5 hours, and it's a 26.2-mile course.
Jeez.
So, very fit
for
man.
Him, yeah.
Yeah, for 69 years old. And like we said, he had a lot of experience in the wilderness. He's done many of the other peaks in California. So I would say he's a proficient climber and experienced hiker.
Sure.
A guy like Carl, you would expect if something happened, he would, make the right decisions. And he even was experienced in this location. It mentioned May 1998, Carl attempted to summit the mountain, but he didn't end up earning the summit and ended up sliding down the mountain with his ice axe. But he vowed to return. So,
jeez,
he must have had some type of accident where he slid down. But so he's familiar with the area. He's familiar with the mountain. He's familiar with the conditions, obviously, because he was up there when it was, May. So that's kind of a little outside of the ideal climbing time.
Okay.
So
I'd say he's not young and dumb, but he had a failed attempt. So you have a little bit of the need to finish what you started. So that could play a little bit into this as well.
Yeah, I think maybe the second summit he kind of was pushing ahead maybe when he shouldn't, and something happened. As I get into the timeline, we'll explain what happened. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's sounding more and more like me. I'm going to hit Capitol Peak sometime soon this summer to finish it because I didn't summit last time.
Yeah. Well, don't end up like Carl.
Well, make sure you do like a 2-hour show on me if I don't.
I don't want to have to find a new host.
Yeah. That's the only
and
reason.
Obviously, I'd feel bad for your family.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, but more importantly, we need to fill a slot here. All right, go on, Mike.
Okay, so that is the basic profile of Carl. Okay. So now I'm gonna get in the timeline, and this is a really great case. Unlike a lot of our other cases, the timeline is pretty sketchy. Sometimes it's due to just a lack of information. Other times it's due to the case being, 50 years old.
Yeah, age of the case and improper documentation or misplacing entire departments of records.
Exactly. But, with this case, the fact that there were 2 other guys hiking with him, we have basically hour-by-hour timelines of what happened, which is unusual so far for the cases we've done. So the route that they were planning to summit the mountain, it starts at Bunny Flat Trailhead, which is at about 6,800 feet. And the distance to the summit of Mount Shasta is around 6 miles. So, people who haven't done a lot of alpine hiking, you might be thinking 6 miles, I could do that in a morning.
Yeah, that's super aggressive.
That's a long way to go. You're going from 6,800 to 14,100, and you've got a lot of gear on your back. Yeah, and it's not like a paved trail.
Insane. That's insane elevation.
You're not on a paved trail. You're going up a lot of rough rock and ice and snow. So it's a tough hike. So 6 miles. They're saying from the trailhead to Lake Helen, which is only 3.5 miles. That's at 10,400 feet. So that's like 3,000 plus feet of elevation gain, and that's 1,000 feet a mile of elevation gain. And that's crazy. Even before Lake Helen, there's a camping spot called 50/50, and a lot of the hikers they'll go up to Lake Helen and they'll stay overnight there, and then they'll make their summit attempt the next morning, because you would have to be in Olympic level shape and to be a really experienced climber to be able to do the summit in one day. Yeah. I think the Rangers probably would advise not to do that.
Yeah, I don't see how that would be very safe for the 99% of the people that would try and even do this. They're even when you get down to the people who are capable of doing it, I feel like it would not be safe for the majority of those people to even attempt. Yeah.
So like we said, the summit starts at the Bunny Flat Trailhead at 6,800 feet, 6 miles to the summit. From Bunny Flat, people usually go to 50/50. We'll stop off there. That's usually not an overnight spot for most people. And then you go from 50/50 to Lake Helen, and then Lake Helen up to the summit. From 50/50, this is going to play a factor into Carl's disappearance. From 50/50 to Lake Helen is only like 660 feet. And it kind of like curves around the mountain. So it's not very far. Okay. Yeah, so when I get into kind of more of the details of the timeline.
And is that a hike? is that like a 660 feet of just like hiking around to a specific point before you start your summit attempt?
Yeah, 50-50 is kind of like I think it's a camping site. I'm not sure, but a lot of people will stop there and then they'll head up to Lake Helen for the night.
It's a flat area that's big enough that you can just relax, chill out there until it's time to move on to the next point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. So we'll get into the timeline now. So it's May 23rd, 1999. Carl is once again heading to Mount Shasta to try to summit the mountain. And on this attempt, he's going with two long-term friends, Milt Gaines and Barry Gilmore. Carl ended up driving for 5 hours and met the other two men at Mount Shasta City. So the night of the 23rd, they stayed in a motel room.
Okay.
And they were all prepared. It mentioned they had ice axes, crampons. They had the proper gear, proper attire. So they were ready to go.
So it wasn't one of those like it started out bad with, oh, Carl forgot this or Barry forgot this one thing, but they didn't think it would be a big deal and they pushed on.
It's not like that. Like Carl started with shorts and sandals on.
Yeah.
It's May, so it's not ideal climbing conditions. We don't know the weather at the time. We do have reports from the two men that the weather wasn't great and there was a lot of snow, but we don't have any official reports of the weather.
It's very early in the season to start climbing.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move ahead to May 24th, 1999, 4 a.m. So the three men get up, leave the hotel. Barry drove the three of them in his four-wheel drive vehicle to the trailhead at Bunny Flat for the summit attempt.
Okay.
Early morning of the 24th, Milt and Barry explained that there were 10 to 12-foot snowdrifts at the start of the climb at Bunny Flat.
Oh, wow.
So I'd be thinking to myself, this isn't good. We're at the trailhead and we've got 12-foot snowdrifts.
Yeah, there's already high winds down. If there's that many high winds down at the base, it's just going to get worse as you go up.
Yeah. So the men decided to make the 3 to 4 mile hike up the mountain to a location where the Sierra Club had an old cabin called Horse Camp.
Okay, so they knew of an actual structure they could get to.
Yeah,
I would say that changes things because, like you said, if I wouldn't go, but if it's 3 or 4 miles, I'd say that's short enough, even in treacherous, that you could turn around. But if they know their way and there's an actual physical cabin there, that's something I might do.
Now, an interesting note that the men stated during the search was Carl was on this altitude sickness medicine called Diamox.
Yep, I took that in Africa.
Yeah, I actually had that when I was out in Breckenridge. I took some. Mm-hmm. So for most people, Diamox, am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, for most people, Diamox will reduce the symptoms of headache, tiredness, nausea, dizziness, shortness of breath, all the things that any of you that are listening have felt when you've been at altitude. And it generally is advised for people above 10,000 feet. But also, the funny thing about this medication is its side effects are almost the exact same thing it's curing. So dizziness, lightheadedness, increased urination, especially during the first few days, blurred vision, dry mouth, drowsiness, loss of appetite, stomach issues, headache, and tiredness. So literally, it's like a lottery. You take it, and either it's going to fix all those things for you, or you're going to have side effects and get all of those things.
Yeah, I come from the farmer world. That's basically them saying that. You see that in everything because partially it's. I mean, you worked with me, Mike. We've done those studies. They kind of put everything out there. Basically, what that means is it works really well for some people, not for others. So you should know how you react to it. Because if you take it and you get those bad symptoms, you're probably always going to get those, and you shouldn't use it. Versus, for me, it's a major diuretic for me, so I always make sure I'm drinking a ton of water when I'm on it.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it works really well for me.
So I think this medication that Carl was on for his altitude sickness plays a big role in what happened to Carl. We can get into our theories later.
I think it's possible. Did they mention if he regularly took it when he did mountains, or if this was like a first-time thing?
No, there was no mention of how long he was on it, how frequently he took it. They just mentioned that he was on it at the time of this summit, and they feel, the two guys said this, that they feel there was some possible adverse effect on his system.
Yeah, it's one of those drugs that can be very effective in a way where when I was going up the side of Kilimanjaro, I was getting that very like where you just want to fall asleep, the long sleep stuff. I mean, it's not like I was on Everest, but I was totally getting that going up the side as we got at altitude. Like, I just want to lay down and go to sleep forever type feeling.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that stuff kicked in. I felt it, and I felt like I was at ground level again. Like I had all the energy, I had no issues, whatever, and I was able to get down the mountain back to base camp just fine.
I unfortunately, when I was on the Big Island, when we hiked up the volcano in Hawaii, we were at about 13.5 or 13.6, and by the end of the night, I actually had altitude sickness, and we didn't have any medications. So
yeah, that's the worst, man.
Shooting headache. There was this real like shack at the top of the volcano that I thought had fleas and everything in it, and just laying down, just miserable feeling.
Yeah, and that's honestly some of the best side effects you can get. I mean, it's really like the worst ones are when you start making bad decisions.
Yep.
So I mean, it can be a lot worse than just a headache. So it's always good when it's just those types of things.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I had some painkillers that I took, and I was able to get a few hours of sleep. And actually, the next morning, I woke up feeling pretty good. But so the men that were hiking with him mentioned that he was on this medication. So, all right, so they've reached this place called Horse Camp, and so after reaching Horse Camp, Carl had to stop and go behind a tree or a boulder because he had diarrhea. So this makes me think that this medicine he was on was starting to affect him. And if anyone's unfortunately had diarrhea, you know it can really, if you're not drinking a lot of fluids, you can get dehydrated pretty fast.
Yeah, I would almost guess it wouldn't be the meal because of how fit he was.
Yeah.
He's probably eating healthy regularly, and I'm guessing that they didn't have just a giant grease meal before their big climb.
Not like we do.
Okay. Yeah, I know we do. And then it's even worse when I come back down.
I know. So obviously Carl at this point is having some, intestinal problems, but the men continued on and they made it to the location called 50/50 that I mentioned this earlier.
Okay.
And it's approximately 600 feet below Lake Helen, which is a major stop for most climbers. Like I said, that's the lake where most climbers will stop for the night, and then they'll get up early in the morning, make the summit. Whenever you're summiting a mountain, and I think, Joe, you know this, you want to try and get up as early as you can.
Oh, yeah.
And beat the morning rush.
Yeah, beat the morning rush, but then you have like your better chance at calm weather.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, so if they have those giant snow drifts, they're hiking through snow drifts. Again, not a long distance, but if they're stomping through snow, he's got diarrhea. You're already starting to dip into if he's drinking enough water or not to supplement what he's losing, which I'm sure was a lot. And it's sometimes hard to realize how much water you're losing when it's cold because you don't feel the sweaty and the hot and the sticky, but you're still losing all of that liquid. So I wonder if he's like early onset losing a ton of water and getting into dehydration.
Yeah, and I mean the thing about that dehydration is once you start feeling the effects of it, it's almost
it's too late. Yeah, you're too late.
At that point you're in serious trouble.
Yeah, you need to drink a ton of water and not do anything, but typically people keep going.
Yep. So it's now early afternoon on May 24th, 1999. The men reported that the wind was blowing very hard. So they decided to stop, set up camp at 50/50. They dug their 3-person tent deep into the sand and stayed there for the night. Milton Berry remember Carl leaving several times again with diarrhea. So obviously this was affecting him in the morning. It's affecting him in the evening. We have no reports on, if he was, getting enough fluids, but I'd imagine you'd start getting pretty dehydrated at that point.
Yeah, and if he's getting dehydrated and he's starting to feel altitude sickness, and if he's getting bad enough where he's making, not making the best decisions, he might not be drinking enough water and thinking he is.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So it's now May 25th, 1999, early morning, At this point, their tent was rattling badly in the winds. It was estimated at the time the winds were exceeding 70 miles per hour as they were kind of whipping around the mountain. So the men were kind of peering out of their tent, and they could see people heading down the trail from Lake Helen past them, kind of going down the mountain. So you can imagine this huge storm is blasting through.
Well, it was going all night, it sounds like. I mean, they dug in because of the high winds, and now they're experiencing those same winds still early morning, and there's people actually leaving that were probably going to summit that are starting to just bail and say no way.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, this is a decision a lot of people, if you're, climbing a mountain, you got to make a decision. All right, do we have enough supplies to hunker down here for the weather to clear, or do we just pack up and try this again another time? Because
sure,
you don't know how long that storm's going to last. It could go days.
Yep, absolutely.
Like I said, they saw people going down the mountain past them from Lake Helen. They decided to stay and kind of ride the storm out, so they stayed in their tent and in their sleeping bags. They mentioned their tent was positioned tight up against the mountain between a few large boulders, so they were adequately protected from the wind. And it says they waited a few more hours and the wind subsided, and then a funny thing is they saw climbers coming back up.
Oh, okay. So I wonder if other climbers couldn't even stake in their tents, and that's why they were moving down.
Yeah,
so
I'm
they might have
guessing,
been thinking, hey, let's wait this out as well, but they were in a bad spot and couldn't do it, so maybe these guys picked a great spot to anchor in.
Yeah, my guess is, they were up higher where there was less cover, and, I've tried to, on Mount Rainier, I tried to set up my tent in driving rain and wind, and, I mean, the wind was probably 20 miles an hour, and it was impossible.
Yeah.
So, all right, so now it's still May 25th. It's late morning now, and as a group, Milt, Carl, and Barry decide to hike the quarter mile to Lake Helen. However, they didn't think they would summit this day, but they wanted to get up there, kind of see how the weather would play out, and maybe make the attempt.
So this is that 650-foot hike you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they got to go 650 feet from 50-50 to Lake Helen.
But it was around a bend or around a corner, so you could, because I mean, on a mountain, especially if it's even a little bit up or a little bit down, you could see that far. Yeah,
from what I read, it kind of curves around the mountain.
All right, but it's still a super short distance.
Super short
relatively
distance,
speaking.
Yeah. So as Barry and Milt were kind of packing the tent up and getting their bags ready, they saw Carl kind of just strangely standing and staring off into the distance, and they mentioned that he appeared cold. You can think maybe he's got some hypothermia starting in from a long night
I'm
of
starting to think it's a mix of dehydration, which can make hypothermia worse, because if your blood pressure is already low from not having enough fluid, you're putting strain there. He's cold and altitude sickness. That's not a good recipe.
No. Now, the next thing that happens, I kind of disagree with what Milt and Barry did, but Milt basically told Carl to start walking for Lake Helen and that they would meet him there. So they wanted him to get going first. They were going to pack everything up and then meet him up there. I usually, whenever I'm hiking with you guys or with whoever, I usually like to keep the group together.
Yeah.
And not split off, especially if, one person in the group is kind of acting strange and looking sick. I'm definitely not going to send that person up the trail ahead of us by themselves.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I get it that it's only 600 feet, but I don't know.
Well, we had this happen at Long's Peak. We were with it was a group of 5, and 4 of us were ahead, and there was one guy that was behind. So 2 of us kept going, 2 stayed behind to wait for him to have that one-on-one. And when we caught up to the other 2 guys, they were actually in Boulder Field, which is just below the summit, and it was getting hit by torrential winds, blizzard conditions. And one of the guys in the group actually had some level of altitude sickness where he actually changed his clothes because his other clothes were wet. No, he legitimately just undressed and put on his dry clothes, which then also got wet. And as we were coming around the corner, he was with the other guy, and they were coming back, and we're like, hey, where are you going? They're like, back to the car. And granted, it was 5 o'clock at night, and we were ready to set up tent, and the car's at the base, and we're like, no, you need to lay down, and we just got him water, wrapped him up real tight, and made him stay. But if he was by himself, he would have just wandered off.
Yeah,
and I'm making a good decision, like, screw this, I'm going to the car, but he literally was thinking, like, I can just go to the car real quick, and it's like, no, that's another 7 to 8 hours of hiking, and you're already cold, and you're wet, and he could have been a casualty of the mountain very easily that way.
Yes, I mean, that's another good example of how quickly, even experienced climbers can get disorientated and start making bad decisions when they're dehydrated.
And this guy has done mountains, and it's totally, and they say altitude sickness can hit anyone anytime for any reason, no matter how used to the mountains you are, whatever. It doesn't matter.
I think that's the biggest killer on Everest is altitude sickness, isn't it?
Well, that and no oxygen.
Yeah.
Recently, as they ran out of air waiting in a traffic jam. Yeah. But outside of that, I mean, there's we talked about in the other episodes where you just start stripping your clothes down because you think you're burning up, and people just walk off and just fall off a cliff, like not understanding, because when you get altitude sickness, especially in that high, your brain starts swelling and you put pressure on the brain in the wrong way. It's going to make you do crazy things.
So, like I said, Milt told Carl to start walking to Lake Helen. And him and Barry were going to stay behind at 50-50, pack up all their stuff, and then they would meet him up there. Milt told, like I said, Milt told Carl that they would finish packing and hit the trail quickly. Barry and Milt left the packed tent at 50-50, and inside of 30 minutes, they were heading for Lake Helen.
So they're behind him a half hour, not even.
Yeah.
Okay.
Half hour, and they left all their gear at 50-50 because I think they were just going to go up to Lake Helen to kind of scope out the weather. And
so this is close enough that they can run up, take a look, come back, get their stuff, and go back if they need to.
Yeah.
Wow. So that is okay. Because like I said, I was wondering, is this 650 feet, but there's technical climb? This is probably just a quick hike around a trail around the corner, see what it looks like, come back and get your gear if it looks good.
So now something interesting happens. Halfway between 50-50 and Lake Helen, Barry told Milt that he wasn't feeling well. So he was going to head back to 50-50, grab the tent, and then meet the guys at his car. Milt was fine with that. So now you got all three of them broken up. So Barry's heading back to the car. Carl,
and you're on your fourth red flag. I mean, you have a dehydrated altitude sick guy who's going into potential hypothermia. That's 2 red flags at a minimum, maybe 3. Fourth one, they send him off on his own. Fifth one, these guys are going and now they break up. One guy's going to go back. One's in the middle. One's supposedly ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not good now that the entire group is separated.
Yeah.
So you've got one guy going to the car, one guy that already left for the next spot, and then, Milt is kind of in between. So,
and I do want to say hindsight's 50-50, because I mean, I've been on the mountain where you're making decisions live in the moment, especially if it's something you do. I mean, these guys are regulars, so you're going to make more mistakes where you're more comfortable almost. So if these guys have done this a lot, one guy's like, hey, not feeling up to it, I'm just going to hit back to the car. Oh, okay, not a big deal. We've been here before. This is the easy part of the hike. Yeah, sure. You grab the tent. That's awesome. Thanks for grabbing it. Yeah. See you at the car.
Yeah, so I agree. And it's a short distance up to Lake Helen,
did I say hindsight's 50-50? I think I did. I have 50-50 stuck in my head because of the campsite. I'm like, I hope we're not seeing 50-50. All right, go on. Sorry.
No problem. So Milt walked up to Lake Helen, and when he got there, he saw between 20 and 24 campsites. So it's a pretty big camp. Milt asked the ranger overseeing the area if another man had passed through and continued to climb. And the ranger did state that one person did kind of blast through camp and kept going. So Milt kind of ran off, and he started chugging up the trail and to see if this was Carl. So he said he got within 100 yards of this guy, but he was moving so fast there was no way this was Carl. So Milt turned back to Lake Helen.
Okay, and I'm assuming he would have recognized his what he was wearing and stuff too, because I mean you can pick people out from pretty far away.
Yeah, so Milt turned around and he started back through Lake Helen. He kind of did one more, kind of scan of the area. No sign of Carl. So now he's thinking, well, all right, Carl must have maybe wandered off the trail. He's got to be down at 50-50, kind of waiting for us. So he heads back down to 50-50, gets there, nothing. Carl's and Milt's, both their backpacks were still at the spot they were camping at. No Carl. So, that short 650 feet, he somewhere. So you've got like 150 to 100 people at Lake Helen, and you've got Milt and Barry at 50-50, and you've got 650 feet of trail that he could have, he went missing on. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, and that's where too immediately what I went to when I did a little bit of the show prep, and as you know, I didn't read too much in the story because you were doing the timeline. I wanted to hear it raw, but I wanted to get an idea of what the mountain face was like because I'd never been there, so I was looking at photos and looking up statements from other climbers that have been in the area. There are not significant presences of crevasses, trees, things that like shrubs that could potentially, if he fell and got stuck here. Apparently, it's basically like when it's technical, it goes up, but outside of that, it's flat and open, and there's no place to fall and hide or where a body could be lost.
Yeah, and one thing that they mention when we get into kind of the summary of the search and rescue is it was all snow covered. So any weird thing that's not normal to the area would have stuck out like a sore thumb.
Sure, you'd even trace the footprints. Do they say, I know you're getting the search, so don't go too far if you don't want to, but was it snowing during the search or before the search started that it could have potentially covered him up?
There was no reports of that. I would imagine that if snow had been a major problem during the search, it would have been mentioned.
Okay. Usually they'll say, search was impeded by wind or snow or drifts or things like that. Okay. Yeah,
it sounds like the weather for this search and rescue was pretty ideal.
Yeah, and we had a lot better records because it was very recent. So
yeah. So, all right. So, like I said, Milt got down to 50-50. Now it's like late afternoon. He's back at 50-50, no Carl. So now it's it's May 25th, 1999, about 5 p.m. There's now another group of people huddling at 50-50. And Milt, talked to them. They actually had a cell phone. He decided, waiting another hour, he wasn't sure what to do. And then he finally decided to take his backpack. He left Carl's at 50-50, and he took his backpack to Bunny Flats. He arrived at Bunny Flats about 7 or 8 p.m.
So it took him took him a couple hours.
Yep.
Well, actually, it took him. Would it take him 1 hour, one and a half hours to get back because he waited for an hour at 50-50 and then hiked back to Bunny Flats?
So it didn't take him long. To get back down.
Hike out's usually like half the time, if even less, because you're going downhill.
And it's smart. He left Carl's backpack at 50-50 in case maybe Carl got turned around and he makes it back to camp.
Yeah, so he gets back there and has no supplies.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So now it's 8 p.m. and Milt meets up with Barry at the trailhead, and at this point they notify the county sheriff's office that Carl's missing. He was first missing. These two guys first lost him probably late morning.
Sure.
So, it's been, several hours now since he went missing. Following the notification of the sheriff's office, the next morning, the 26th of May, a massive search and rescue operation kicks off, initially with U.S. Forest Service and the local county sheriff's office.
Okay, and from what it sounded like from before, he was talking to rangers that oversaw the area up at the lake. So they have stations there already, so
yeah,
it's not like they have to get up there then begin the search. I'm sure they had guys up there immediately looking around it, and I'm sure they already had a heightened sense. So if you talk to a ranger and say, I can't find my guy, and you come back through and still can't find him, I wouldn't be surprised if the rangers up there were already kind of looking around.
Yeah, I imagine they're looking around. They're telling other climbers to keep an eye out for this guy.
Yeah.
Initially the U.S. Forest Service and local sheriff's office started the search near the trailhead. The first day of the search, officials used the Shasta City schoolyard as their base of operations. Then eventually, as the search started, getting larger, they moved to the airport.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
Yeah, it was at this point that Barry ended up calling Carl's wife, Bobby, and kind of notified her that he was missing. And
yeah,
she,
if they're
she
taking
said
over an
something
airport
strange.
space and bringing out aircraft and stuff, it's now not this
Yeah.
ground foot thing, let's go find him. It's becoming a major operation.
Yeah, and it's interesting when they told Carl's wife that he went missing. She mentioned she said, "I had a premonition that something like this would happen." So I don't know if it means anything, but it seems his wife kind of, had a weird feeling that day that he was going to go missing.
That's crazy because you always hear stories about like those connections, like the instant something happens, someone across the world like just knows it. They don't know how they had that like gut reaction.
Yeah. So later that afternoon on the 26th, some mutual friends of Carl and Bobby actually flew Bobby out to Mount Shasta City to monitor the search efforts. So she got out there as quick as she could, and it sounds like some of his other friends were out there. So you can tell he was a well-liked guy. One of his friends said he had a heart of gold and would do anything for his friends. So well-liked guy in the community.
Big rally of support for the issue and getting everyone out there to really help as much as they could.
Yeah, exactly. And, Milt reflected on his memory of that morning, and he adamantly states that there were, like you said, there were no large crevasses in the area where Carl was hiking. There were a few large holes near some trees, but that was it. He stated that there was no place for Carl to hide. He said he just vanished.
Yeah, and
So-
it's like when you get above tree line too, it's very, you can see stuff. You can see a lot of stuff, and in a mountain like that where it's not in the portion they were hiking from the pictures I saw, it's not aggressively steep. The hike is short. That's just, it's crazy because you'd even think somebody with altered mental status due to some sort of condition.
Yep.
Yeah, you could see them stumbling off a cliff or accidentally taking a wrong step. There are no wrong steps. This is a lot of flat area for a mountain to get to the next area.
Yeah, so, it makes no sense. So eventually later, the next day or so, I'm not sure on the timeline exactly, Milt and Barry actually hiked back up to Lake Helen and kind of in the main search area, and they passed through 50-50, and Carl's pack was still sitting there.
Okay.
So obviously he hadn't been back to his pack, and they talked to the rangers at Lake Helen and confirmed they still haven't seen him. So now the search is escalating. The county assigned this guy with the coolest name ever as SAR coordinator, Grizz Adams.
Chris Adams. We got to get him on the show for sure.
He's probably really old by now. It sounded like back in '99 when he was interviewed over this search and rescue operation, he was already a veteran of search and rescue operations.
Okay.
But
so far, you haven't said anything that would make me not want him on the show.
Well,
if he's like an old
you can go
salty,
try and find him.
yeah, if he's an old salty dog, that would be even better.
So, like I said, he was a veteran of hundreds of search and rescue operations. As soon as he took over the SAR operation, he immediately ordered the Army National Guard helicopter pilot to take a group of professional climbers to the summit, and then he had each climber descend down a different route very slowly looking for Carl. So
that's a really interesting method. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I've never heard that either.
Okay, they must have trusted his ability then too to get to certain areas, but yeah, I mean they're basically from the like I said, from the pictures, even from the summit down, you can see a lot of area. So I'm guessing you thought you get, because there's a bunch of different ways you can get up this mountain. If you send guys down each side, you should be able to get a good vantage point, either find the body or find him there huddled up somewhere.
All his gear was at 50-50.
Yeah.
So I mean, how high would you be able to get?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get past the technical part at all. I mean, you could attempt it, but there's, from what it sounded like, especially the ice parts, it's not like you can kind of get halfway up and then you get stuck or fall off. You wouldn't even be able to make the first couple of main points because you need crampons and ice axes and things to even go
exactly.
up.
But, I mean, when you're doing a search, you try all, everything.
Oh, yeah. I think that's good because, I mean, the view from the top to the bottom is much easier versus then...
Yeah.
And a lot easier of a hike on your people as well, too, instead of using all their energy hiking back
going up.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the climbers slowly descended in all directions down the mountain, and they found no tracks, no helmet, no ice axe. They said no evidence that Carl was ever even on the mountain, which is kind of creepy. So,
besides his one pack that was left behind by his buddy.
Yeah. So the other weird thing about this is, like we said before, at Lake Helen, there's 20 to 24 campsites and around 50 to 100 people on the mountain in that area, yet nobody saw Carl.
Wow. So it's okay. This is, again, different from almost every story we've had. Not only was it heavily populated, it was heavily populated at the time in a really short time window in an extremely short distance.
Yep.
That's almost like, and now I'm speculating, so please don't take this as written word or gospel, but I feel like from the camp they were at and from the lake camp, if you're going around that bend, people could see essentially the entire duration of the hike from both sides potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
So like there'd be very little blind spots. I'm just judging this based off of mountains I've done that have had kind of this turnaround reef to get around a different point and go a far distance. If you're looking down from the lake, I'm guessing you can see to the point where it turns. And then if you get to that turn, I'm guessing you could probably see back to the campsite at 50-50.
Probably, yeah. So
That's what it looked like from the pictures, at least.
Yeah.
So there's very little blind spots.
So this massive search and rescue operation went on for days, but they didn't find one piece of evidence that Carl, like we said, was even on the mountain. Not a piece of clothing, not human remains, nothing. There was one point after Carl vanished that his friend Milt became so disturbed that he spoke with 3 different psychics and he asked for their assistance. So he's just like,
he's grasping at straws.
Everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be so nerve-wracking, too, for a friend, especially somebody who's with him. Because, I mean, it's survivor's guilt, but also it's not like they made complete terrible decisions. Sure, again, hindsight is 20/20. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have sent him off, but with such a short distance, I don't think I would have made a different decision. Especially if I saw a guy there that maybe they didn't think he was that out of his mind. Maybe they thought he was just cold and said, hey, start walking so you can warm up. We'll meet you over there because it's only going to take 20 minutes for us to walk there after we pack up. You know, just, hey, walk down the street, maybe moving around will warm you up a bit. So I wouldn't even call that a bad decision. Hindsight, bad decision, but they're thinking about his well-being, saying, hey, walk around, you'll warm up a bit. We'll be right there. So that's got to be eating away at him.
Yeah, it's eating away at him. So he's trying to do anything. So he goes to these psychics, and one stated that Carl was in a body of water. Another one stated that he was in a crevasse, and another one said it would be many years before he was found. So, none of that really
They
made
speculated
sense.
at anything you could say for any mountain, for anyone missing anywhere.
Only body of water really would be Lake Helen, and I'm sure they searched it.
Well, and with all those people there, you think somebody would have saw a guy walk into the lake?
Yeah.
Especially with the weather conditions?
Yep, and there really wasn't any crevasses in the area, so obviously that's not really an option. So, later on after this happened, Milt was asked what he thought happened to Carl, and he stated, there's over a 50% chance that something very odd happened. So, even Carl, or even Milt, he thinks something really strange happened here that is unexplainable.
Yeah.
And from everything we researched, there was not really an official, explanation for what happened to Carl. We've got some notes from Grizz, who is a veteran of over 400 SAR operations, and he said this was one of only 2 operations that resulted in nothing being found of a person, so no trace of them. So it's very rare.
Yeah, even in a lot of the strange ones we've covered, the ones that we have slated to do in the future, they'll find a little piece of something, or it's still unsolved mystery, still don't know what happened, but there's a trace the person was there in the first place. It's almost like this person was erased from history entirely, and the only thing that's left is his bag.
I know.
It's insane. It's totally an X-Files style thing that occurred because like you said, they've mentioned several times, and even Grizz noted there's a fresh blanket of snow that wasn't disturbed. That makes it incredibly easy to search. And his clothes that he was wearing were bright colors. That against the snow, again, very easy to search. So at this point, again, not to be morbid, but if you're thinking, okay, now we're not in rescue, we're in recovery, not a great situation, stinks, but they expect to find something. And they aren't even finding clues or hints that the person was ever on the mountain at all.
Yeah, it's a little spooky. They even, Grizz stated that they even had teams working in a grid pattern down in the forest below the mountain. So all around the mountain, they were searching as well, and nothing. They didn't find anything of him.
Wow.
So, from what I read, law enforcement generally believes that Carl went missing between 50-50 and Lake Helen. But the question that keeps coming up when you talk to people involved in the search is where? I mean, there's nowhere for him to hide. It was less than 1,000 feet to the lake. Like, where did you go?
Yeah.
And he was only out of sight from his friends for 30 minutes.
Well, and that's where you have the guys there, too, that know the mountain like the back of their hand. And you don't have any statement saying, well, I guess he could have went off this side here and went down the mountain this way. Because a lot of times you'll have people saying, well, here's the possibilities because there's a little stream that goes down here and then it ends up in deep brush. And he could have fallen in there. The resounding overall comments is there's only one way to go. Otherwise, it's just like this flat, deserty part of the mountain. It's like a crater part that's just flat, easy to traverse. And it's such a small window that it's baffling literally everybody that touches it that knows the mountain.
Yeah, and Grizz even stated that he was bothered by the fact that his searchers weren't finding any of Carl's equipment. So the logical thing that you could say happened to Carl is, he succumbed to exposure, he got hypothermia. But if that was the case, you'd expect him to start ripping off layers of clothing, ditching his boots, his gloves.
Yeah.
The standard thing that people do when they get hypothermia. They didn't find a single piece of clothing from Carl.
And you have so many witnesses.
Yeah. So
that's insane.
It was mentioned that during, in the community of Mount Shasta City, that during this search, the same phrase kept coming up that they said, it's like the mountain just opened up and swallowed him.
Yeah.
And
that falls in line with the local legends.
Yeah, it falls in line with the local legends of those weird beings that live under the mountain.
The Lemurians.
So, that's the case of Carl Herbert Landers. Out of all the cases we've done, this is by far the one I'm struggling with trying to think of a theory that makes sense.
Yeah, because we've had the disappearances that don't make sense, but this is such a small window, such a heavily populated area with the experience and everything all combined. And then the search area not being riddled with either crevasses or super... Because a lot of the places that we have people go missing, there's a lot of dense brush.
Yep.
And that's legitimately where someone could get lost and maybe not found for many years because it's when you're bushwhacking in a mountain, you can't see 4 feet to the sides of you. So there could be a body and you don't even know you walk by it. Yeah. But this is wide open. This is just wide open space for way farther than he would have been able to walk within the amount of time that they started searching, especially surviving through the night without gear.
Yeah, and you got to think that it was getting cold at night. It was probably in the low 20s during the day. So he had no shelter. Assuming maybe he, was dehydrated from taking that altitude sickness medicine and he was kind of getting delirious and he wandered off. You're not going to survive very long in those conditions. Well, and that's where I'd say
that all those red flags and all those things you just mentioned, to me, limits the distance he can even go. Even if he, beeline, straight line because he's delirious, he's not going very far under those circumstances. No. And living. So, collapsing and what have you. And with such a short search window beginning right there, too. Yeah. You would have found him right away.
It's puzzling, and you can't really say that he went down the mountain because his friends saw him go, up towards Lake Helen. So, I think you can rule out animal attack. There's, black bears and coyotes, but those are at lower elevations.
Yeah, the elevations are made it sound like that's not a huge issue. Maybe with that many people and food.
Yeah, it's possible.
But still, I say highly unlikely.
Yeah, I think the fact, I think hypothermia would have been high on my list, but the fact that they didn't find a single piece of clothing.
Yeah. Yeah,
that
normally I
baffles
would
me.
say frozen or
Yeah.
altitude sickness, wandered off course, froze, and died somewhere off trail. But then again, it's that the openness and the shortness of the distance is what's really baffling.
Yeah.
Now, have we gone through, and I don't want to go down a road of accusations or anything, but to me, I think it has to be vetted out. Are we guaranteed that all three of them were together when they got to the mountain? So is there reports of people at 50-50 that have seen all three of them together? So I'm almost wondering, not even saying foul play the friends, but did he never go and there's a cover-up? Did they bring bags and strategically leave his backpack there and then go report he's missing?
I would assume...
I know I'm getting in crazy Hollywood theories because I don't know. So it's like, does he owe a gambling debt to the mob and they have to make him... his friends are like helping him disappear or something?
Yeah. No, I mean... You do need a permit to summit Mount Shasta, and you can only get that by going to the ranger station. So I'm assuming...
Yeah, I want it because they don't record names initially, but you do sign in.
Yeah. I'm assuming that he, at a minimum, checked in.
Okay, because otherwise they wouldn't even search and say, you don't even have that guy here.
Yeah, he wasn't in your... So at a minimum, he checked in. Now, what's crazier, the theory you just mentioned, or that beings living in the mountain swallowed him up?
Well, or that he vanished. I mean, it's all possible. Or they checked in and it was all part of some plan to get him gone for whatever reason.
Yeah, honestly, that, while as far out there as you can be, besides
I think
alien beings eating him.
Yeah.
I think that might be one of the more logical explanations for what happened to him.
Yeah.
Maybe he lived a double life and he, had some debts or, something was going wrong and he had to, kind of like that Arvin Nelson guy.
Yes.
That we did.
Yeah. Like we think it ends up being maybe like a WITSEC thing. I mean, what else could it possibly be? I mean, it's quite literally all things lined up perfectly, and there's like a tiny little snowdrift that covered him up, and no searcher or the hundreds of people found him.
And no one in the last 20 years has found him.
Yeah, or that, or...
I mean, you think about...
supernatural beings took him off the mountain into the mountain itself, or he's in hiding, and his buddies, lifelong friends, helped him do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think those are all crazy and all on the table.
Yeah,
I really do.
I didn't even think of that theory, so that
it kind of hit me coming up because it hit me because I didn't read as in depth, and after you were going over the statements from Grizz and other authorities and other people hiking the mountain.
Yep.
And yeah, I even saw in your notes they had cadaver sniffing dogs. And dogs
I forgot
come
to
in.
mention that.
So like that too, like they didn't have significant weather changes from when they brought out the dogs to
no
smell
scent
stuff,
of
and they had no picked up scent at all.
Yeah. Which, when we talked to
and that's honestly that's when I thought too, like, okay, did he check in and did he ever actually go up the mountain at all?
Yeah. I mean, and we did, when we talked to the search and rescue director from Colorado, he did mention that, the cadaver sniffing dogs, they have a really powerful scent, but if the area gets contaminated with other hikers and people, it can get really hard for them to pick up a scent.
Yeah.
So we gotta mention that.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt. Those dogs are amazing in what they can smell, but the area can get contaminated to the point where they can't pick up a scent.
Sure.
So, but adding that into everything else, I mean, you had professional climbers coming down the mountain.
Yeah, I wonder how the cold and altitude play in that, because of also you hear the other side where these dogs will follow a scent for 7 miles of someone who was in a car to like a specific building, and then they find a body there.
Yeah, so
but it's also not at altitude on a mountain in snow either. Like I'm sure that affects it greatly as well.
Oh, probably, yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, you've got professional climbers that came down from the summit. You had an Army National Guard helicopter pilot that I'm sure was doing searching from the air. You had search and rescue people down in the forest below the mountain, working in a grid pattern, all the way around the mountain, and no one found anything.
And now
Nothing.
20 years of high activity on a mountain.
20 years, probably every year becoming more and more active.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to think about this, but on Everest, they've been finding more and more bodies as, climate change makes the planet warmer, things are melting, and, things are appearing. So you've got to assume it's warmer on Mount Shasta now than it was 20 years ago. If something happened where he got snowed in.
More and more people are getting out in national parks and doing things maybe they shouldn't. So I'm guessing there's a bunch of people that maybe don't even summit the mountain, but hike out to the lake to camp. Yeah. That's something I would definitely do if I lived in that area.
I am fully on board the Joe train with this theory now. I think he never was even on the mountain.
So you think like he checked in at the office or got the permit, checked in, and maybe
I think he's hanging out with Arvin.
Yeah, him and Arvin are in Witsec together.
I mean, what else could it be?
Do you think so? Let's look at it this way, because I don't always want to paint somebody's bad. Like maybe it's a safety thing. Like for some reason he had to, and his buddies are helping him out for his own good, and he didn't do anything wrong, but maybe, I don't know, he witnessed something he shouldn't have. Yeah. Or I don't know. And now they're helping him quietly because they think the authority, like, let's go full Hollywood. They can't talk to the cops because what he saw was like something the cops were doing. So his buddies are now in this heroic mission to, we're going to check in, we're going to climb this mountain. We have this great backstory. Yeah. I'm going to bring your bag up to camp, and by the next day we're going to report you missing. Yeah. And that seems super insane. It seems super insane, but
it would be insane in any other circumstance.
Yeah, but it kind of answers the question of what happened very well. That's
the search and rescue
we only have his bag there. That's why there's no trace of him anywhere else.
The search and rescue people mention that it's like he never was even on the mountain.
Yeah, and that's kind of what struck out to me as odd. And then when the dogs couldn't pick up anything, again, like you said, grain of salt, they might have not just did it, but his bag's there, but he's not, and he never was potentially.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. I think I'm on board with your theory.
All right.
Just because none of the other theories make sense.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and reach out to Grizz.
We'll do one of our shortened episodes if you get a hold of him. I would love
absolutely.
To talk to
that
him.
would be great. Just because I'd love to get his. Maybe he's off now and can be a little bit more open about opinions. Because a lot of times, they'll be more PC about what they think. Yep. But if he's not working for SAR anymore or anything like that, maybe after 20 years of dwelling on it, like you said, he's only had 2 ever at that point, at least in his 400 career. I'm sure this is one that sticks with a guy like that. Like, what did we miss? What did we not do that we couldn't find this guy?
These guys take pride in, finding, every single person that goes missing. I mean, that's, they're not going to sleep until they find you.
Well, so to have a case where I was a medic and a firefighter, and it's more than a job. It's literally a mission, and each case, each call, each medical emergency you go to, it's personal to a certain degree of. Mm-hmm. We're going to work hard to do right by this. So if there was somebody, if my job was search and rescue and on arguably one of the easier mountains to search, not saying you can always rescue, but at least recovery, and not find a single trace of that person, that's got to be almost make you go insane about what did I do wrong? What did we miss? What could have happened? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a very bizarre case, and I don't think we'll ever truly know what happened to Carl.
All right. In closing, I think the Hollywood, the positive Hollywood, he saw something he shouldn't have. His buddies are heroically helping him go into hiding. Yeah. As an unsolved missing persons case. Honestly, that's where I'm at. That's it. That's my theory.
Yeah, and I think that second theory is he was swallowed up by the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that's it.
So. Well, Joe, I think we've been talking long enough here.
Yep.
Once again, thank you for tuning into Locations Unknown. If you want to help support the show, you can go onto our Facebook page and pick up a couple of our hats and bumper stickers, and we also have a Patreon page where you can donate money to the show.
Yeah, we'll take anything. Even constructive criticism.
Yes, especially that.
So yeah, definitely check out our Facebook page, Twitter, YouTube. Are we anywhere else now?
Instagram.
Those are the big three. Instagram.
LinkedIn.
Yes. Oh yeah, we do have a LinkedIn profile.
We do.
I do. I think I forget to post there a lot because really. But all right.
So check all the socials out. We're on all of them. And leave comments about the show, and if you have any ideas on shows we should do, let us know. And just once again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.